Welcome to the center of the universe and the home of the 18-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts. This is the X's and Argos podcast with Ben Grant and JB.
Welcome to the X's and Argos pregame walkthrough brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. Ben Grant joined as always by JB, and we're here to get you set for a huge East Division matchup between the 11-2-1 Montreal Alouettes and the 7-7 Toronto Argonauts on Saturday night at BMO Field. Lots to talk about this week. There's 4 new Argos signings in the transactions department. The Argos also unveiled their indigenous logo for this week's exciting game. Enoch Mwamba is on a reality TV show. I'll tell you as much as I possibly can about that, and it's not much. Plus, Tavares Daniels, Flo Remalade, Tavares McFadden are all honored by PFF this week. We got a great question for Pick 6. Plus, we've got our game preview, injury report, OCDC, one thing, predictions, put me down for 20, and our CFL picks. All that more is coming up on this episode of the X's and Argos podcast. Before we get into things, Something in the Water Brewing is a place you've got to visit if you are going to BMO Field this Saturday for the game against Montreal. The timing is perfect. You're there for an evening game. You've got hours of pregame to entertain yourself. Head on over to Something in the Water Brewing. It is only steps from BMO Field. We had a great crowd there last time for it, and there's so many great beers to choose from. That's the best part of this. It's what I love about talking about our sponsors. I would talk about them anyway because they're our sponsors, but I love the fact that I love their products, and all of our listeners do as well. We've had so many winners from the contests they've sponsored, from the tickets they've given away. People have dropped by there, and they all say the same thing, that it's amazing how good the beer is and what the selection is pretty incredible. So make a point of stopping by Something in the Water Brewing and get a 6-pack of Longboat Pale Ale, the beer made for fans of the Double Blue. You won't regret it. JB, let's get into things. We're going to talk about some signings first. Now, before I get into player specifics, do you like the idea of, because you're bringing in 4 guys here that aren't CFL guys. These guys haven't been in the league. They're not guys that have been on other teams, and they're bringing them over. These are fresh guys that they have gone and found that haven't got any CFL experience. Do you prefer that, or you like the idea of bringing in guys that have been in the league for a little bit that are maybe sitting out there without a contract?
I don't know if I'm so dogmatic that I come down with one or the other. I think I think a mix is good. I think it's nice to bring in guys who have been in the league, and what you're going to be able to plug them in, and they know, generally speaking, like they're going to be professional about what's to be done and how the league works. And I think there's a comfort level with bringing players like that who know how everything works. But you're not going to get that lightning in a bottle, right? You're not going to find that player who potentially can be a game changer. So I think it's that old line about like a higher floor and a lower ceiling. I think a mixture of both. I love when they bring in somebody who nobody has looked at, and maybe you catch something.
Yeah, I like that too. I think, and especially with the way the Argos are set right now, like they've got, where everyone is. It's not like they've got a giant hole at one position where you're like, man, we really need to find this guy that can play this spot. They're not in that situation. And so really what you're bringing guys in for, maybe someone like this is around the time of year that Jared Brinkman came in a few years ago before the Grey Cup. He made a difference. He was an impactful player, but that's really rare. Most of these guys you're bringing in, you're thinking about next year at this point. If one of them strikes you, then sure, yeah, you can work them in later in the season. But I don't see this as being a desperate need or anything, but bringing in guys for the future, bringing in guys, just sort of doing your due diligence and keeping that bottom of the roster churning, like you always say, I applaud. And I love, and the Argos have been great at going out and finding their guys. That's something that we keep noticing, that everyone that is cut by the Argos or isn't re-signed by the Argos signs with other teams, right? Because they've been a good team over the last few years. But it's also a testament to their scouting. And the Argos continue to go and find new guys. Instead of finding guys that other teams scouted, they're finding their own guys. And it's nice to see that after the couple of years of criticism with all the Calgary Stampeders that came over initially with Coach Dinwiddie. I love to see that it is the Argos who have really been, I think, without question, the best team in the CFL at finding new talent, guys that no one in the CFL had heard of. And now suddenly they're making huge contracts for other teams in the league, for the Argos as well. And maybe one of these
Yeah.
four guys too, right?
No, it's preposterous. I mean, honestly, it's preposterous. My brother asked, like, does Toronto just feed every team? Like, every team seems to have five Argos on it. Yeah, I think it's been incredible to watch the other teams pick at the roster, and the roster has been able to achieve what we dreamt about 100 years ago, which was that the Argos have a profile. That's when as a franchise that you have reached cruising altitude, or you're going to be a good franchise for a long time, is when there's a model, when there's a type of player that you're looking for. That's kind of the sweet spot in player development, and that's where they are right now. They're not just throwing darts. They know what they want. They know who to bring in. They know the type of person they want to bring in. So yeah, it's exciting to watch because they definitely have hit more than they have missed, and almost everybody gets another job after after having had a look.
And that, fortunately, they seem to be able to keep this churning, though, because you see what happened to the Stampeders. Like, you look at the Stampeders this year, and they finally kind of exhausted all of the players during that run that they had that other teams picked away, and finally there was nobody left. And they didn't seem to be able to keep up with the discovery of new talent, not the same way that maybe the Argos have so far. So, but you got to keep it going, because that's the thing. Like, if you don't keep finding new guys, if you don't keep that scouting going, you can't just rest on your laurels, because all it takes is one successful year and suddenly everybody signed to new teams. So love seeing them bringing in new guys. I'm excited to see if any of these four can be a player we're really talking about next year as the next big thing. I'll go through the guys that they brought in. I don't know a ton about these guys. I watched a little bit of film on them. For some of them, it's kind of tough, though. So first of all, the most high profile would be a defensive lineman named Jalen Green. He's a James Madison guy, and it was the Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. And we've seen Toronto take these like Conference Player of the Year players and turn them into something. It was one of the first things we noted about Jared Brinkman when we came in. We're like, oh yeah, you got an all defensive player. Let's take a look at this guy, and his tape jumped out. And I think we can say the same thing with Jalen Green. Like, he does jump off. And, we'll see what he actually does in the CFL. It's a very different game, as we know, but I think he's got some really nice measurables. I think he's one of those guys that size-wise, they didn't quite know what to do with him when they're looking at him in the NFL. And might be able to make an impact here. 6'1", 245. And I'm guessing the way that it's setting up is they're going to be using him as an edge rusher and use that speed around the outside. They've had some success with guys like that, of that size, that build, that faster sort of Parrish or Remalade mold. And I think that he's going to probably look to guys like that in terms of building his game. The next guy is linebacker Clayton Glasgow. He's been an indoor football league guy for the last couple of seasons. Indiana State product, a tackling machine. I think that's probably the interest there. They're looking at him as a linebacker. You want someone that's a sure tackler, but you need someone with that combination of size and speed as well. He's 6'1", 225, and moves really well for that size. So he'll be one to watch. But I love that. Anytime you bring in an Arena League guy, I'm interested. My eyebrows are raised, because it's not just saying, oh yeah, this guy was on such and such NFL team's practice squad. Let's bring him in and take a look. To me, when you're finding an Arena League player, you've seen something. There's something that jumped off in film, and you're like, hey, we got to take a look at this guy. I think maybe others have missed on this player. Then we got Willie Drew Jr. I think he's junior. I feel like he's junior. I don't see it in front of me here, but I think he is Willie Drew Jr. And he's a CIAA Defensive Player of the Year, so another one of these conference guys, Player of the Year for Virginia State. I have trouble diagnosing both he and the next guy to talk about. Level of competition a little bit different, but these guys look, when you watch them, they look like superheroes against the competition that they're playing against, which is, I think, always hard to deal with, because you don't quite know how to quantify that. But yeah, he's a guy that spent time with the Carolina Panthers, so clearly something jumped out to them. They wanted to take a close look at him, and so Willie Drew joining the Argonauts. And then his fellow defensive back, Derek Sluka. And Derek Sluka was D3 Ithaca. 51 tackles, 6 interceptions. He's 6'3", 215 pounds. And another guy, you watch some of his, like Sluka playing D3 he's in the wrong league. Like he was just one of those guys that, like some of the guys we've talked about before who have come from D3 or NAIA, and you're just like, well, this guy looks like a god out there. And Sluka's one of those guys. So we'll see how he fares when he's going up against CFL competition. But he was invited to the Indianapolis Colts minicamp, so he's had some experience with some high level talent. So those guys are coming in. We'll see what they can do. I'm excited to see them develop over the course of the next few weeks of practice, and maybe down the stretch, we get to see one of these guys play. We'll have to wait and see on that. JB, you have had a chance to see the Toronto Argonauts Indigenous logo. I want your first thoughts on it.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. I love that the league has really embraced this idea. It looks gorgeous. It's subtle, but it's clearly, it isn't just like a little, I don't know, sort of like attachment or flourish. Is created by an Indigenous artist. It looks beautiful. I'd love to see. I don't know how the copyright works and how all of that works, but I mean, I would love to buy a T-shirt with it. I would love to buy, I would love to get all kinds of swag with it, because I mean, I think it's really like a beautiful, subtle piece of art.
I'm looking right now as we speak, because I know they have the hoodie with that logo available on the Real Sports site. If you go shop.realsports.ca, it's the like navy blue hoodie with the Indigenous logo on the front. It looks fantastic, and they initially ran out really quickly. And I know I saw a lot of people on social media complaining that they went to try and get one and there weren't any there, but they've restocked. And so right now, as we speak, late Wednesday night, all sizes are available from small through to triple XL. So if you wanted to pick up one of these, and it is a fantastic looking logo. I love it. I think we're probably biased. We're around the team a lot, and we like the Toronto Argonauts logo anyway. But looking at the 9 CFL logos, with the Indigenous artists, I think the Argos have the best one. They all look spectacular. Like they're really cool. I think the Alouettes logo's got something going on with it for sure. We've seen the Winnipeg one over the years, and the Lions as well. Toronto, this is the first time they've had one. Toronto, Montreal, and Saskatchewan. I believe this is their first time that they're going to be able to feature the Indigenous logo, which I think is really cool. I love that all 9 CFL teams are now a part of this. And to go along with the logo that they'll be wearing, the Argos are going to come out with orange jerseys pregame, and those are going to be auctioned off. Let me get you that information too, because you can go and actually purchase these pregame worn Argos orange jerseys through auctions.realsports.ca. And you can find more about that on the Argonauts website. They've got a great article detailing all the things that are going to be going on this weekend for the game, as they recognize First Nations communities in Canada and in around Ontario. They've got a great graphic of the logo on the Argos helmet as well. And you can find that link to involve yourself in the auction if that's something that interests you. And the proceeds are donated to Toronto Council Fire Native Cultural Center. So love to see this initiative. Love that all 9 teams are on board, and I can't wait to see them. I can't wait to see them come out of the tunnel with that logo on the helmet. I think it's going to look fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm currently buying one before we post this pod, and everybody tries to beat me to it.
Yeah. This is like, it's not like stock tips or anything like that where you can get in trouble for early purchases. I think you're good. But yeah, no, it is like the fact that, and I've already ordered one myself, and so the fact that you're on there as well, that speaks to, I think how important we both know this is, but also how cool the logos look. So love to see them doing that. And I gather that throughout the game as well, there are going to be festivities and celebrations honoring First Nations and celebrating First Nations, which I think will be fantastic too.
Yeah, I mean, it was I think every year they get better and better. I think every year, the Argos have gotten better at these different events. In my opinion, I think they've gotten bigger and bolder and more celebratory and made a bigger deal of it. I know that that in the past, some of the reconciliation weekend games have been amazing and fantastic talent, and really positive, sort of celebration and embracing of the topic. And I expect it to go really well this year. I'm excited.
Enoch Mwamba is on a reality show. And I want to tell you a little bit about it because this falls under our umbrella of Argos related news, but this is not an area of expertise of mine. I feel very comfortable talking to you about football. I'm not very comfortable talking to you about reality shows. And so in terms of my research, I reached out to Ryan Ballantine, who I've worked with for a while at 3 Down Nation, and actually got a chance last weekend. I was in Calgary coaching, and I got to sit down with Ryan for the first time ever. We sat and had a meal together. It was great finally meeting him in person. And I decided today, I'm like prepping for this show, like I need a reality TV expert. And Ballantine, who himself is a reality TV star from Big Brother Canada, I thought, you know what, he's going to know more than anyone I know. And so I gave him a call. I don't understand this show that well. I've read a few summaries. Ryan Ballantine explained it to me like I was a 5-year-old child, and I think I now have a grasp of this, and I'm pretty intrigued by it. So the show is called The Traitors, and I guess there's like 20 people in this mansion together, and there's sort of like an Assassin's vibe to this. You've got 4 bad guys who are traitors, and the rest of the guys are called the Faithfuls. And I believe that group of 20 people is composed of like 10 reality TV stars and then like 10 regular Joes. And I just found it really funny that Enoch Mwamba is just like the regular Joe, even though he's probably, I'm sure he's the most famous person of all of them because he's not a reality TV star. He gets lumped in with everybody else. But it'll be fun to watch how that goes on. And I gather that it's sort of like most reality shows. At the end of each episode, they all get together and vote somebody out. But the traitors are slowly killing people throughout the course of the show. Every night they quote unquote kill, just in case you're not watching on YouTube and can't see my air quotes. They vote to eliminate somebody, and then the next morning at breakfast, they all arrive and one person is missing. And all of the faithfuls, they don't know who the traitors are. They've got to try and get rid of all the traitors. There's $100,000 on the line. And at the end, once they get down to the last, 4 or something like that, if there's any traitor left at all, then they get all the money. If all the traitors are gone by the last 4, or again, whatever that is, then that money is divided up amongst the faithfuls that are remaining. So there's some other, he went into some detail on there's some intricacies and twists that the producers can throw in there. But I gather this has been a pretty famous show, originally starting in Europe, and I guess the States have run a version of it. And I think this is season 2, and it's on CTV if you want to find out more about that. I love the fact that it's Enoch. He's so good on TV anyway. And so even if it weren't a good show, I think I would watch it just for him. So I'm going to have to catch this.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hate reality television, although I do like sports, and so someone has made a comparison between those two things. However, this show's, I've heard of this show. I mean, it seems very popular around the world. I think it's awesome that Enoch is, building his media presence. He's a, terrific, charismatic guy. I think he gets better every time he's on television. So I think that to continue to kind of build his he's clearly very interested in media, and then, to be able to build his sort of identity, I'm all for it. I love to see it. I love to see the CFL try and generate more stars. I mean, who's the, other than, Matt Dunnigan, who ex-CFL star is not something that rings out. I would love that to be a more common thing.
This week, 3 Toronto Argonauts were recognized by PFF as being on their team of the week. And it's one of those things that it's so easy to forget about because last week's loss is so disappointing, and it's sometimes easy to forget. You had a few individuals that had outstanding games. First of all, the offense played well. They scored 31 points. You quickly forget when you're on the losing end of a game like that, like how well some of these individual players played and how well the game went for the most part. It wasn't until the end where things started falling apart. The players recognized DeVaris Daniels had a fantastic game, and he was recognized as one of the receivers. He had that deep pass as well. Such a beautiful route. Just looked every bit the professional receiver he is. And I think he's starting to finally get comfortable playing on that field side. You know, he's made a transition throughout his career. DeVaris started as an outside X, as a guy that is going downfield, like the position that Damonte Coxie is playing currently, if you're not familiar with how we label the receiver position. So it's to the short side of the field on the outside. That's where you almost always find Damonte Coxie. That was DeVaris. That's what he played at Notre Dame. That was his position. He was really good at it. When Damonte Coxie came into the picture, and actually before that, he was bounced inside. And so he started playing out of the slot, and that was new. And that took a little bit of transitioning for him. It wasn't for a while until he actually got better at that and started excelling. And then with Makai Polk coming into the fold, they wanted Makai to play that same W spot, the short side slot. And so they bounced DeVaris over to the field side. And this is his first experience playing over there. And he's gotten better and better at it each week. And they're finding creative ways to move him around and to get him into space. Because you've talked many times about what a good route runner he is and what good instincts he has. The field side should work well for him. There's so much more room over there. And we know that Chad Kelly doesn't, it's not like some quarterbacks, I don't want to say ignore the field side, but they certainly focus in on the X and W to the boundary way more than Chad Kelly does. He is free to fire all the way across the field from left to right. And so as DeVaris gets more and more comfortable in that spot, I think we'll see him recognized like this more and more. But yeah, he's coming off a great game, even though he could not get into the end zone for you, JB, to have your bet come through.
But it's great to see them reconnect, and I think that's going to be valuable. I mean, you can't have a weapon that important not be integral if the team is going to do damage in the playoffs.
And Flo Remolade also recognized, had a great game. I think we forget about how good his game was because the sacks weren't there. You know, the Argos had 2 sacks, but that was Bo Levi Mitchell playing a very smart game where he was getting rid of the ball immediately. He knew how good the Toronto defensive line was. And I don't even think, like, if you look at how well Hamilton played the week before, was that against Ottawa? Yeah, they were outstanding. That left side of the offensive line, they didn't let any penetration through. They were like a brick wall. They didn't look like that at all against Toronto, and that shows you the quality of Toronto's D-line. It's just Mitchell made plays. Like he knew, I've only got a second and a half before I got to get rid of this football. And he was disciplined with that. And he picked the Argos apart 5 yards at a time. He wasn't going to let that pressure get to him. But you look at Remolade on a rewatch, I couldn't believe how many pass rush wins he had. It seemed like every single rep, if the quarterback's waiting for his normal 2 seconds, Remolade would have come away with multiple sacks. But Mitchell's very familiar with playing the Argos. He knows what he's up against. He played a really smart game, but that doesn't take away from the individual effort that Remolade had and has had so many times this year with that speed and that ability to just sink and get so low to the ground, especially against taller tackles, and just sort of water ski his way around the edge like that. And then Tavares McFadden, the last player that was recognized as a second defensive player. And you forget that not a lot went his way. It's, you know, he had his positional responsibility locked down. He made a couple nice hits. I love seeing when Tavares McFadden gets physical. I love to see that, the way that he can unload on guys that are coming off receiver screens. He's so good at like weaseling through those blocks on quick screens and lighting up those receivers. So you notice Hamilton like went away from that to his side. That wasn't something they continued to do the way that we've seen Montreal teams do that in the past. Instead, they went with the running game. They went with the quick passes into the middle, into the slot, but they avoided Tavares after he blew a couple guys up. So all 3 guys very deserving of their PFF mentions this week. All right, JB, we got a pick 6 question. I'm going to give it to you first, and I'll take over from there. And this is a question from Joe. Joe, you have won a 6-pack from Something in the Water Brewing, our sponsors of our show, but also the sponsors of this segment. Every week, we ask for a question from you, the listener, and if we answer your question on the show, you get a 6-pack of beer, courtesy of Something in the Water Brewing. And so, Joe, you are our winner this week. I will get in touch and give you all the particulars. Joe's question was, how would you assess the play of Kevin Mattal this season? Do you think he should be played more? And can he be an important weapon for the Argos down the stretch and into the playoffs? And I like the fact that you're including that last part too, Joe. So, JB, where do you see Kevin Matala? He hasn't had a lot of action so far this year. In terms of his stats, they've been pretty modest for the most part. He's down as the 10th Argos receiver in terms of receptions, 12 catches, 116 yards, 9.7 per reception. What do you make of his play?
I think he's flashed. I think there's a couple things to keep in mind. I think the first being, he was drafted lower than expected, and so he was drafted onto a pretty good team. So he isn't necessarily, he has a much harder roster to crack than say had he been drafted by Edmonton. So I think that's at play.
Sorry, do you mean the Edmonton Elks, the number 3 team in the power rankings?
I know. Well, he could be part of that renaissance. Yeah. Anyways, I don't. It's all fake. So much. So much fraudulent movement up and down these charts. Although, if anybody would like to bet the Elks with me, I would certainly like to be involved in that. Now, no, I think that he had a harder roster to crack. That was a pretty good wide receiver room. Early injuries are death to wide receivers. Whether it's CFL or NFL, like getting injured in camp is, I mean, you hate to see it. I think it's so hard to keep pace, to stay in the mix. So I think that definitely changed his trajectory a little bit in terms of this year. And I don't think there's any way to really reset that. I think, obviously having Kelly come in halfway through the season, makes it difficult too. I think that I'm really excited for what he will do next year with a full healthy camp, knock on wood, because he has shown he has star quality. But I think it's very hard to demand much of a first year wide receiver. I don't think people necessarily see that as like first year wide receivers very rarely are going to come in and be a star. I mean, it happens, but it's not. It's certainly less likely to happen. So I think that he's shown some good stuff. And I don't honestly, I don't see a need necessarily for him to get more touches this year. I think you're looking for the future.
If he had been drafted by Ottawa, which is where I and so many other people thought he was going to be drafted with that number 2 overall spot, he would have been starting for the Red Blacks all season, or at least as soon as he got healthy. But like you said, that's the thing when you get drafted onto a good team, especially a good team with Canadian talent. You've got Richie Sindani ahead of you on the depth chart. Sindani is a professional football player. I know Sindani doesn't necessarily flash, and Kevin Matala, I think, has a higher ceiling than Sindani, but that's not an easy guy to pass over. This is a really complicated offense. And like you said, if you're not there from the beginning, I do think it's so tough to catch up. But if this were another football team, if this were another team that didn't have a list, like Tommy Neild and Dave Unger, like there's so many good Canadians here. But right now it's Sindani that's playing his spot. And it's going to take some time to earn the trust from the coaching staff and from his quarterback, and to familiarize himself with a very complicated pro-style offense that Ryan Dinwiddie's running too. So it's not going to come automatically as talented as he is. Now, like you said too, he has flashed. There are moments where we're like, man, we got to find a way to get Kevin Matala the ball more, because he does look really good with the ball in his hands. I do think next year, I bet you'll see a lot more stuff designed for him, because what I love about him is I think it's only happened once, where he's got one carry out of the backfield. I love that look. At 230 pounds, at his size, the way he hits people, I think that offers you an element that none of the other receivers have. And that's an intangible that you can really play around with. And I wouldn't be surprised going to next season if there are some specific things. They've got him penciled in that R receiver spot, the innermost receiver spot to the field side. Because from there, you can play around with trickery. You got your back in the backfield. You send him out wide. And now everybody's dropping back into pass sets. So you've got 5 receivers out there in the formation. You've added a running back. But now Matala, who's kind of a bit of a hybrid body type wise, maybe he can come in and grab a jet to that side, or even turn up the middle, have another guy come in and block and lead for him. And with that size, he also should be able to turn into a really effective blocker. And he's good at it already, but he can get better at something that he can improve on for sure. So I do think going forward, he is going to be a highlight machine. I think he's going to be in the league for a long time. I think he's going to be a star, but he came into a situation that was going to be tough anyway, and then getting injured off the bat, as you highlighted, it really cuts your season down. So I do hope we see more and more of Kevin Mittal every week as we get closer and closer to the playoffs. I would expect we will, but I do think next year is going to be his year where he really shows what he can do.
Well, you know how I love to plug three down. But there's a really interesting article on three down about wide receivers drafted in the CFL in the first round. The first one taken each year. And it's fascinating if you go back over the last 20 years. Obviously there's some names and some hits, but especially in the last 5 or 6 years, way more misses than hits. So I think it is not easy to play wide receiver in the CFL. It is very difficult for Canadians to crack the CFL as a wide receiver. So I think the potential he has flashed should make everybody really happy. That it looks like it could be something, because a lot of times they're just, it just doesn't happen. Even for the people who go first overall, they're just not ever able to become what you hope. So I think it's great to be optimistic and not to be too upset he isn't a key part of the offense. That's just, that's the nature of joining a pretty good team.
Thank you, Joe, for your question, and hope we were able to answer it to your satisfaction. But a lot of it is guesswork at this point. We got to wait and see what he can do on the field. But from what we've seen so far, we're encouraged. We really love it. Let's get to this game, JB. It is a big one, as the last few have been for the Argonauts. 7-7. There's some, it's not all hands on deck necessarily yet. We don't have red alert blaring or anything, but it is starting to get a little dangerous. Hamilton is getting closer and closer. Edmonton, I suppose, as well in the crossover. They're a hot team right now too. And if they get ahead of the Argos in the standings, remember, Ty won't do it. If they get ahead of the Argos in the standings, that crossover is in play as well. The Argos are in a good spot. They should be able to take care of business, but let me just run down the situation for you. So first place in the East is out. They are mathematically unable to catch the Montreal Alouettes. And in fact, the Alouettes themselves can eliminate Ottawa with a combination of wins and losses this week for those two sides. Ottawa's 3 points ahead of Toronto, and I still think that's where Toronto's mind should be. They should be focused on Ottawa. They've got a game against them in a couple weeks' time, and Ottawa's been reeling lately. They got off to that great start. They came back to earth, as we kind of foretold, but Toronto has to be better than them throughout these final four, 3 points better than them throughout the final four, and they still do have a chance. Not that the tiebreaker is likely to come up, since Ottawa has a tie and Toronto doesn't, but if it does, Toronto still has the ability to win that season series with a win that is more than the size of victory, the margin of victory that Ottawa put on Toronto. So that is still in play, but it's the Tiger Cats behind them that I think people are maybe most nervous about. I don't count myself in that category, because I think 4 points to overcome in 4 games is really tough, because even if Hamilton wins out, that's not a guarantee. Toronto would have to go 2-2, I guess, and Hamilton win out for that tiebreaker to come into play. So if Hamilton even just drops one of those last 4 games, and it's not an easy 4 games they've got, then Toronto's just got to go 500 down the stretch to wrap that up. And I just don't believe, I haven't seen enough from Hamilton. I know they haven't lost in over a month. They're playing really good football. We saw how good their offense looked last week. It is very difficult down the stretch of a CFL season to put those 4 wins together. So I don't see that. I think there's a chance they could go 3-1. I think they're more likely to go 2-2, in which case Toronto just needs to handle their business, take care of things at home, and everything should be okay going forward. The problems have come on the road and in the division, and that's where they can rectify things starting this week, not for the road stuff, but for the division stuff. They're 1-5 in the division this year, which is a little bit absurd. They are 6-2 against the West, which is obviously a lot better, and 2-5 away from home, 5-2 at home. So that's been a big difference in this one. They need to, again, take care of business against Montreal this week. Montreal hasn't looked like the powerhouse they looked like in the early part of the season. Through 7 or 8 weeks of the season, everybody was talking about how Montreal was in a class by themselves. No one else was near them. And then it was the second tier of teams and the third tier of teams. They've come back to earth in the last few weeks. They tied in Calgary. They've had a couple really tight nail biters, including that tie earlier in the season against, that was against Calgary, sorry. And then a loss here or there. So they still have that 11-2-1 record, but the Argos have shown they're capable of beating this Alouettes team. They need to do the same this Saturday, just to breathe a little bit, perhaps. Let's get into the injury report, JB. This is a mix of good and bad news. So if we look at the Alouettes first, Marc-Antoine Dequoy has gone full both practices so far this week. We expect him to play. Jamar McGloster, same thing, offensive lineman with that back injury, went full both times this week. Nate Bahar wasn't able to practice yesterday with an illness, did practice today. And Mustafa Johnson, that would be a big deal. He looks maybe a little bit more questionable. He was limited in practice yesterday, did not practice today. That's one to keep an eye on because he's such a difference maker and such a disruptor on that defensive line. So that's the Montreal Alouettes injury status. For the Argonauts, you've got Dejan Brissett, full again, and he was full all last week, full again this week with that knee injury that he's rehabbing from. And that's another, I didn't even mention Dejan Brissett when we were talking about Kevin Mittal. That's just yet another guy you've got to try and hurdle. Brissett trying to find his way back into the lineup. Maybe this is the week he gets activated. Who is going to miss time if that's the case? We'll have to wait and see on that. Isaiah Cage has not practiced yet this week. That's concerning. He came out of last week's game, and you saw the play on that line drop significantly when Cage came out. It's not the same without him on the field. So we'll have to see how the rest of this week's goes, but I don't like the fact that he wasn't able to practice yesterday and today. He's been battling through that hip injury for a while, and oblique hip kind of being added to that status doesn't make me feel better about it. Kadeem Carey didn't really play in the second half much last week. He's got a calf issue that he's been dealing with. He's limited the last couple of days. We'll have to keep our eye on that. Janarian Grant, full both days. That's huge because I feel like him playing last week might have been the difference for the Argonauts. They weren't able to generate much in the return game. If he's able to come back this week, that's going to be a huge boost. And Gregor McKellar going full with that toe injury both yesterday and today. Quincy Moget, no sign of him being able to practice with that knee injury, and that's, I don't think, a surprise to anybody that saw that happen. So that's the injury status for this week. Some good, some bad, but there are certainly a few guys we got to keep our eyes on. All right, let's get to your favorite segment, JB. It is OCDC. OCDC is a segment we do every week where we break down the offensive and defensive strategies for both teams. JB, I'm going to pass it to you first as the defensive coordinator for the Montreal Alouettes. How are you going to handle the Toronto Argonauts offense?
Montreal has has played really well. They are undefeated on the road, unbelievably. They're very good at home. They're probably the most complete team in the league. Defensively, Toronto is starting to really get back to where they were last year in terms of averaging 30 points. I don't think you can bait as well. I think that the Toronto offense is a little more sophisticated. I mean, really, I think the issues are with the defense. So, like, if I'm Montreal, I think job one is still trying to get after the quarterback. I think job one is that you're looking to create exotic blitzes and you're looking to bring pressure. The line has shown that it can be pressured and it has given up bunches of sacks at different points. So I think for sure you're looking to do that. You're looking to get Chad running, getting uncomfortable in the he plays great off schedule, but I think that you can rile him. You can get under his skin. You can get him frustrated, especially if you get a couple of 2-and-outs in a row. You can see him starting to bubble, and that's often where you're going to get yourself a nice pick. So I think that you want to bring a lot of that heat early. You're still going to want to keep a shell. You're still going Chad still wants to throw the ball 30 yards. So I think you're you're going to keep a high safety for sure back there, looking for something that's tasty, and offer him those long cross-field throws, and see if he's interested in it. But I think job one for Montreal is blitz pressure. That's where I'm coming. I'm looking to use as many sort of different looks as I can, bring it from the secondary, bring it from different places, because Toronto has shown that is an issue, especially in pass first, in pass obvious downs. Um, that I think you want to try and keep Kelly from getting comfortable, because he is feeling it, and he is kind of regaining his MVP level. So it's going to be a big question for the offensive line, I think, against Montreal.
Yeah, I love the idea of being really aggressive against Kelly for the Alouettes, because you have to wonder how much he might get rattled by a slow start. Remember, he didn't play in the other two games against the Alouettes this year. The last time he saw this team was in the same stadium at BMO Field for the East Final. And you wonder if some of those memories are going to start coming back a little bit if Montreal can be aggressive and make some plays early on. Is it going to be a little bit of that Buckner walking back into Shea sort of feeling that we talk about often in sports? So I think it's really key for Chad to get his confidence early on in this game and not to get any sort of sense of, oh man, here we go again.
Yeah, I think that Montreal, they haven't been a sack machine, but they definitely have guys that can destroy a game. Obviously, Beverett, but like they have guys that can destroy a game. And I think that's where I would bring it as Chad starts to develop into a little more confidence. I don't think what worked earlier will work anymore. I think now you're going to have to really fight him. But the reality is, I think, much like playing a great quarterback like Bo Levi, you're going to have to put up 35 points to beat Chad. Now, if Montreal can do that, then maybe they have a shot at winning. But I think that's what you're at as a defensive coordinator is he's going to be hard to keep in the box. That's just the nature of the CFL. I think it's going to be very hard to keep Chad under 30 points.
Switching to the offensive side of the ball for the Alouettes, my game plan coming into this, I want to see how Toronto is going to test me, but my plan is I think we're going to see Toronto play the way that they have generally against the Alouettes and the way that they have most of the season, including last week, where they will give you those short passes. And that proved to be Toronto's undoing last week against the Tiger Cats, where Hamilton receivers were able to take those sometimes just 2 and 3 yard passes and turn them into first downs, or at least get close to first down yardage. And Cody Fajardo, like Bo Levi Mitchell, they're two of the perhaps the only quarterbacks that will actually spend the whole game doing that if need be. And that's sort of a mark of a veteran QB. But we've seen Fajardo do that before. I think Fajardo's best plan of attack against Toronto is the way they attacked the Argonauts the first time these teams played in BMO Field early in the season when Montreal came away with that 30-20 victory. And it was just receiver screens and 5-yard passes. And I go right back to that. That is my plan. You're running those all hooks, the outside floods, like nothing too fancy, nothing too dangerous. And you're just taking what the defense gives you. And then as soon as the defense comes up and starts pressuring, as soon as they get frustrated, that's when Fajardo goes over the top and tries to hit a big play. And so I would just go right back to that strategy. I don't think Toronto has shown enough in the last few weeks to suggest that they're going to completely abandon that style of play. And so I think if I'm Montreal, I'm going to try and punish Toronto with the consistent passing game, high percentage completions, even if it's only 5-yard gain after 5-yard gain. Let's switch to the good guys. JB, what is your defensive plan for the Toronto Argonauts? How do you stop Fajardo and Les Alouettes de Montréal?
I mean, it's a great question. They're not a good running team. They pass while they can kind of do whatever they need to do. I think much like the Hamilton game plan, you cannot give Fajardo those easy underneath passes because he is a veteran and he is comfortable and he'll take an extra 50 cents every time you offer it. And, he'll just keep stacking those in the dollars. So for me, I think that even though Montreal does like to go down the field, I would much rather have Fajardo throwing bombs than have Fajardo, going down the field at 7 yards a clip. I want to take away that underneath stuff. I want to take away the running back as a pass option. Really, really concentrate on 15 yards and in. And if Fajardo throws, have a high safety. If Fajardo throws 30-yard bombs, then so be it. But I think watch out for those, but watch out for the post and the seams, force him to throw the fly along the rail. But take away that underneath. You can't let him kill you with that underneath stuff. And I would rather him take shots downfield than have him feel comfortable. If I had to defend one or the other, that's how I would do it. And, and like, I know it sounds a bit obvious, but for sure, you have to get pressure. You have to be able, like that's Toronto's defense is built around an effective defensive line. And that has to be the case, for the secondary to hold up. They have to be able to get pressure. Fajardo's not a young guy. He's not the most mobile guy in the world. You got to get after him. And so, I think that's what you're looking to do is really kind of crush that 15 yards and in. Even though he is capable, it's not disrespectful. He is capable of throwing that bomb. But if I had to pick my poison, that's my poison.
Switching to the offense, my plan is running based, especially early in the game. Get Chad Kelly settled into this one. I think you have to treat this one just a little bit differently as Coach Dinwiddie. And I think honestly, it wouldn't actually seem that different because the last two games they've been very run heavy early on anyway, which I like. I think that's actually worked quite well. You can't knock Toronto's offense for last week's performance, and they looked electric the week before that in BC. So you go right back to that. Run the football. I think Montreal can be run on if Mustafa Johnson's missing as well. That defensive line is going to be a little tighter in their rotation. I love running the football. Even if Kadeem Carey can't go, that's fine. You've got two backs that can do it in Adebaboye and McMahon. Keep running the football with those guys, and that will soften them up for later on in the game where you need to close this out. Because this team has been, you can run on Montreal all season. Like people have, their defense is great, but their passing defense is elite. Their run defense is good. And I think you're going to attack what they're good at, especially if they're a little banged up on that line. There's going to be opportunities. It's going to get a little bit, it's a bit unpredictable to know exactly how game script will go. But at some point, Montreal, they have shown they will bring more guys into the box. If you're gashing them, they'll bring guys down. They trust their DBs, especially on the outside. They trust their guys one-on-one. They trust their guys to make plays. And I think if you can draw more guys into the box, this is where you now have to lean on guys like Damonte Coxie, who's had a couple quiet games in a row now. He's played so well against the Alouettes, and this is one of those get right games. Seems like maybe the wrong term for it, because it's not like Damonte Coxie has been invisible. It's just he hasn't had the opportunities that he had earlier in the season. I think this is one of those games where Coxie can go off for like 120 yards and a touchdown, and Chad Kelly can find him deep downfield. So I think that's set up by the run, and then you look when they start bringing walking halfbacks down closer, walking that safety up like they like to. When they bring Dequan into the box, find Damonte Coxie deep downfield. How does this one? Oh no, I'm not into. I was going to ask you how this one ends, but I would have skipped over one thing, JB. Give me your one thing before we get to predictions. What's the one thing you're looking for?
Yeah, it hasn't been that successful this year.
Nor have mine.
I'd have to say, and a lot of times they usually end up the game with losing the games where one thing isn't achieved. I think if you're playing Montreal, if you can keep Fajardo's passing percentage below 65, I think you're onto something. I think he is a very accurate passer, especially that underneath stuff. I think you have to have him throw the lower percentage stuff. So that's my goal, under 65% passing percentage.
Yeah, he's like 73 on the season or something like that, and getting him down to that area would be tough, but I think you've got the recipe to do it. Like if you're going to try and get him down to the 60s, it's through forcing him to do something other than those easy checkdowns that he made in the first matchup between these two teams. My one thing, I think I think it's got to be defense. I think we need the defense to step up this week for the Argonauts in order to see them win the football game. And I think the magic number is going to be about 21 points. Montreal's defense is good. They just don't let teams get into the 30s. I think Toronto's going to be able to score. I think if the defense can hold Montreal to 21, I think they go on and win this football game. And so that's going to be my one thing, under 21 points for the Alouettes, and that will do it. So now, your prediction, JB, how does this one end?
No, I see it a little more, probably more like 27.
You think it's going to be that high scoring, eh?
I do.
Okay. And do you have the Argos winning 30-27 or
I
losing
do, yeah.
30-27?
I do. I think the Argos come out on top. I think they win a shootout. I think that's what this Argo team is. I think that they need to win shootouts.
I've got the same margin of victory, the same result in the win-loss column, but I've got Argos 20, Montreal 17. I think this is going to be really tight. I think it is going to be a defensive struggle. I don't think it's going to look anything like the game last week, but it is going to be a fight. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 6-3, 6-0 score at halftime, something like that, and then something like 20-17 in the end. I think the Argos do win. I just can't see them losing 2 straight games at home. The Toronto Argonauts have been the second best team in the CFL at home in the Ryan Dinwiddie era. Only Winnipeg is better. They've only lost 4 games at home since the pandemic, which is absurd. The Argos are at, I believe, 7. But that's an outstanding home record. And again, 5-2 this year. I just don't see them losing back-to-back games. I don't care who it's against. I just don't see that happening for the Argonauts, especially this Argonauts team led by Coach Dinwiddie. I think McManus is going to be a factor. I think last week he was kind of getting his feet under him a little bit. I think he is going to play a heck of a game. I think Coxey's going to play a game. I think they're going to find a way to get it done, but there will be stressful moments, Argos fans. The Argos win 2017 in my view. All right, it's time for Put Me Down for 20. JB, you were 0-2 last week, and you are now at 154.5 golden fleeces. I split on the week, but I lost a little bit just due to the juice, so I'm at 221.5 golden fleeces. Let's get into this week. What are your bets for this week? Where are you putting your hard-earned golden fleeces for both the Argos and your non-Argos game?
Well, I mean... I know it goes against my score, so I guess there's a bit of a hedge here, but nothing that should upset your pearl clutching. I do have the under.
After your 30-27 prediction.
Yeah, well, look, I think this is a perfectly fine way of hedging. I do have the under here at 48.5 at plus 130. So I'm covered either way. But I mean, in both cases, I have Toronto. I think Toronto comes out on top. But just in case there's a bit of a rock fight, I'm covered there. Sometimes you gotta take care of business. And then this may be where my fleeces have gone in the past, where I start to lose the plot a little bit as I start losing the fleeces. I'm going to take your Edmonton Elks. You're rocketing up the power chart Edmonton Elks straight up to beat the Bombers. The Bombers, I think, are due for one of those weird Winnipeg games where they lose inexplicably, and the Elks are plus 188. And no one can stop the Elks right now. Between them and Hamilton, it's going to be quite a great cup in BC.
For my 2 wagers, I'm going to put 10 golden fleeces on the Argos outright. I do this pretty much anytime they're an underdog. I just think there's good value there, especially at home. You're a home dog. For the Argos money lines, plus 108. And then for my non-Argos bet, I'm going to take, this is Ottawa-Saskatchewan matchup, which I'm really excited to see. I think that's going to be an interesting game. Kalen LeBourne under 53.5 rushing yards. I think this is a really difficult team to run against. Saskatchewan defends the run so well. There's a lot of interesting stories in that one too. Raquel Armstead's on the Riders. I just wrote an article on him if you want to check that out on 3 Down Nation. His 207 yards rushing last week after the after the Red Blacks let him go. The Riders pick him up and he drops 207 yards right away on the Calgary Stampeders. I don't foresee that kind of performance this week against Ottawa. But I do think Saskatchewan is going to put on a show in terms of defending the run. So that's where my hard-earned Golden Fleeces are going. And I'll take this opportunity to remind you, the listener, not to take any of our betting advice seriously. We're just having fun with it, and we ask you to do the same. Do not risk your hard-earned money on anything we say, because we clearly have no idea what we are doing. Let's get to
getting worse
as the season goes on. So we'll get to our CFL picks now to wrap things up. I was 2-2 last week. I knew a couple picks, like right after I said them, I'm like, I don't like that. Like I had Edmonton over Winnipeg last week, and the more I thought about it, I'm like, what am I doing with that pick? I just didn't see that happening. You were 1-3, so you had other problems, but you got the Winnipeg win right last week, but you had Calgary for some reason. So we all had our own issues last week. Let's get into this week's picks. Edmonton at Winnipeg. I can't wait to see your result, because are you going to hedge for a third time today or not? We'll see. I'll go first, though. I am picking Winnipeg. I am done picking Edmonton. Winnipeg doesn't lose at home. I'm picking the Blue Bombers. Are you going to stick with your Elks, JB?
I am. I feel it. I feel they're ready. It's got Winnipeg losing to Hamilton for no particular reason at home written all over it. I like the Elks.
Hamilton at BC. I'm going with the BC Lions. I know Hamilton has been playing lights out football for a month, but this is the thing. 2 of those wins have come against the Argonauts, who they just, it's not normal. Like you saw, as a Patriots fan, you can talk about this, having played the Jets every year. When the Pats were in their glory days and winning Super Bowls every other year, the Jets would treat those Patriots games so much differently than the Pats were treating them. And that's what I see in the Tiger Cats Argos games, where the Argos are just, they're going out there to play a football game, and the Tiger Cats come in like their lives depend on it, but seemingly only against the Argos. I don't think they're going to find that ceiling that they hit last week. I think BC wins this game handily, and so I'm going to take the Lions.
Yeah, I like the Lions too. I mean, they're coming off a bye. They're coming off that Toronto loss. They are the better team. I think Rourke is out there. I mean, Eastern MVP Bo Levi Mitchell is still a problem, but I think BC takes care of that.
Ottawa at Saskatchewan. This was going to be fun. I think it'll be a good game. I think you are going to get the best from both of these teams. It's going to be it's just going to be a good quality football game. I don't think it's going to be like a barn burner, like a 49-46 or anything like that. I think it's going to be a modest score, but I just think it's going to be good quality football. There's a lot on the line for both these teams. Ottawa's been reeling lately. Saskatchewan finally has a post-Labor Day win under their belts. Maybe they come at this one with a bit of vigor. So I'm going to take the Rough Riders. Where are you going?
Yeah, no moving day for me, I guess. I think Ottawa is starting to look a little pumpkin-y, and I like the Rough Riders to win at home.
And then last game of the week is the Alouettes at Argonauts. I'm sticking with the Argos for this one. Are you doing the same, or is this hedge time for JB?
No, look, there's nothing wrong with hedge, and I don't like necessarily it being besmirched as a legitimate tool of the trade. Toronto, I think, gets right here. I think that the team has shown that they are good at bouncing back from losses. This is a very important game, I think, for their own confidence as well as for the standings to take care of a team that's right at the top, especially at home. I like Toronto in this game.
7:00 Saturday night at BMO Field. Make sure you go down to Something in the Water Brewing beforehand, and then walk on over to BMO Field. It's only steps away, and enjoy the Argos game as they take on the division-leading Montreal Alouettes in this all-important East Division clash. That will just about do it for us on this X's and Argos pregame walkthrough episode. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Together, fight the foe.